Let's take a look at the Settings app in Windows 10X. We'll go to our Start button and choose Settings. And it looks a lot like a traditional Windows 10 computer. As the years have gone by, Microsoft is moving things towards Settings and away from Control Panel. And there is no Control Panel in this version. So we've got lots of different options here. We have the System icon, for instance. In the System icon, we can go right to Display and we can change the brightness. Now, in our emulation version, you're not going to be able to see any difference between the brightnesses. We have an option here to scale and layout, which will lock the rotation. So that way, if you turn your Windows 10X device sideways, then if you have it locked, it will not turn. It will stay with whatever layout that it had when you boot it up, which is going to be vertical. We also have some options for the battery. You can optimize for battery life or for image quality. So if you go with battery life, then you're going to see a lower resolution image quality. And there's a video here that shows you the difference between the higher and the lower resolution. If we click on sound, then we have the option here to go to the master volume. We can make that higher or lower. We've got the speakers, of course, but if you plug anything in, then you'll be able to use those. We have the built-in microphone, which is going to be our recorder. And you can test out the microphone as well. Now, in emulation mode, you're not going to be able to see that, but if you actually have the device, you'll be able to do that. We can go to power and sleep, and we can change the sleep settings. By default, it's going to be 10 minutes. We can go from 1 minute all the way to 5 hours. There doesn't appear to be a way you could manually type in an exact amount, so you just have to use one of those defaults. And then we also have the storage that can tell us how much storage that we have and what's using that storage. And it also uses a feature called Storage Sense, which is going to automatically free up space when it thinks that you don't need specific files anymore, sort of like temporary files. This is the same as the disk cleanup application that we used in previous versions of Windows. So if you don't like the way it's doing its job, you could just turn it off here. We go into Clipboard. You have the option for saving multiple clipboards by clicking that on instead of just using a single clipboard. If you use the Windows logo key and the V when you get the electronic keyboard, then you can scroll through all the different types of things that have been saved to your clipboard. Let's click back. That was the System icon. We have Network and Internet. And this allows us to set up a VPN. So here we can go to add a VPN connection. So here's the VPN provider. Now, of course, you're going to want to use the built-in Windows one. If there is an application for another provider, then you'll see that in the dropdown. So you'd have to install the app first, and then you would see it. The connection name is going to be something like Office, if you have an Office VPN. But if you have multiple different VPNs, you'll want to put in those different VPNs for each one. And then as far as the server name or address goes, if you're using SSL VPN, you're going to want to put the exact name in of whatever the server is that you're connecting to. If it's not using SSL VPN, you could just put an IP address in if you'd like. As far as the VPN type goes, if you know exactly what type of VPN it is, it's faster to go ahead and click that one. If you don't know which one it is, then you're going to want to just leave it at automatic and it'll find which one. And you can see here which ones are supported. Now we have the type of sign-in. By default, you see the username and password, but we're increasingly moving from username and passwords to other things like smart cards, one-time passwords, or certificates. And if you want to put your username in, you can here. I'll just put an administrator, for instance, and a password. And when you're ready, you can click Save, and it'll show up under the Add a VPN Connection. But sometimes you have to go out and come back in order to see it. And there it is. And now we can connect, or we can make changes to the connection. Here we can also turn on airplane mode, and we can see in the emulation mode, it's not going to allow us to turn it on and off. Let's go to Apps. And we can see we have the installed applications that come with our Windows 10X computer. And that's going to be a lot of different applications. Now, some applications you may not be able to get rid of, while others you can. You'll just have to click on one and find out whether or not uninstallation works, for instance. And if you downloaded any maps, you can click on offline maps and see them there. Here's where we can change the time and language in settings. So by default, we see United States, but you can change to any location or region you are in. And if you're traveling, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and change that because it's going to update your time properly. But if you don't like the way the formatting is done, then you can leave that to United States or whatever country you're from. You can also click Change Data Formats. You'll be stuck with the Gregorian calendar. However, the first day of the week, you can change from Sunday to another day such as Monday. You can change the date layout if you'd like, if you don't like the way the standard one is. Long date layout, short time, just a couple of options there, and long time. And if you'd like to change your language, you can click Language here. Now, what I did was I went ahead and downloaded the Spanish language, so you can see both English and Spanish. And if you hit the drop down, you can see both options. So if I'd like to change from English to Spanish, I can do so, but I'll have to restart and then it'll all be in Spanish. If I want to change to a different language than that, I'll just click Add a Language, and I'll just choose the first one at the top, click Next, and then it'll start downloading that language. And that download can take anywhere from a couple of minutes up to 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the speed of your connection. And then you'll see that option in the drop-down list, and then we'll go ahead and click Install, and then we'll be able to drop down to that particular language as soon as the download is done. Now, after you change that display language, you'll have to restart in order to see it. If you want to go back to a different language, come back to the same spot, change to the different language, and then once again restart, and you'll be back in. Let's click on Keyboard. And it's showing me the 3 keyboards with the 3 different languages that I have. The 2 I downloaded and the one that came with it, which was English United States. So if I want to add another keyboard, I can click here and just type in the type of language I want. And then we see all these different options. So for instance, for German, we see a lot of different German options. And for Spanish, you'll see a lot of different options as well. Here is the autocorrect area. We see spelling for autocorrect is turned on by default. It will autocorrect those words. It will highlight misspelled words if you want. If it doesn't have an idea of how to fix those, you'll see that highlighted. Under typing, we see to add a space after or add a period after, and you see the double tap the space bar. So if I double tap the space bar, it's going to add a period after that. It's going to add a space after. I choose a text suggestion. Under the touch keyboard, we have some additional options such as showing the text suggestions as I type. Sometimes that annoys people, so you may want to turn that off. It's up to you. You can also choose to play key sounds as you type. So if you are in an area where you don't want that sound to be played, you can turn that off. Capitalizing the first letter of each sentence is automatically turned on. Use all uppercase letters when I double tap Shift is a very useful thing to have, but you may choose to turn that off as well. And then you also have the multilingual text prediction. So this is showing text prediction based on the languages that we have. And once we're done there, we can click on Home or the back button, either way. We have some great privacy options here. By default, you're going to see that the Windows Track app is going to be turned on. I turned it off earlier, but if you want to leave that on, you can. You can also click on Manage your Microsoft Advertising and other personalization info. So what's going to happen here is it's going to give you the option to open up the old Edge or the new Edge, depending if you want to use the new Chromium-based one or the old one. And then that'll pop up in the other side of the screen and will give us some privacy options as well. So you'll need to sign in with your Microsoft account, and this is going to be the same privacy options that you get if you log into any web browsers. This is not specific to Windows 10X. This is if you go to any web browser, log in as yourself, and then you're going to see those privacy options. And those will span across the various different devices that you have. If we go to Speech in the privacy section, We can allow or disallow using your voice for dictation. So if you'd like to speak into your device, you can certainly do that. Turn on online speech recognition. You'll have to launch the Windows Speech Recognition app and other services that don't rely, as you see here, on cloud-based. We click on inking and typing personalization. It's going to use your typing history, and that can be really helpful, especially with handwriting. If you do any handwriting on here using one of the notepad features, for instance, then you're going to be able to have it predict what it is that you're writing, as well as what you typically type, and it will give you suggestions based on that information. If you want to go to activity history, you can see what you've been up to, and if you don't want other people to see it, then you can click to clear it. We'll click on Manage, and once again, we'll click on the Edge version that we would like, and we would have to log in to see that information. By default, the Send My Activity History to Microsoft is turned off, so you may want to just leave that off. As far as locations goes, you can click on Location, and you can allow or disallow applications from being able to check out where you are. And by default, you'll see in the emulation mode, this is turned off, but you will have that option in the final one, which is going to be on the Surface Duo phone. So you can turn that on for allowing access to the location of the device, as well as allowing applications to have access to your location. Now, that can be really useful for a map program, for instance, but it may end up being a security issue for other applications, such as Facebook. We can go to the camera area. Now, in emulation mode, we do not have a camera, but this is going to allow applications such as Skype to be able to access your camera. So in some cases, it's a great idea, especially if you use video in your applications. But if you don't use that, then just go ahead and turn that off. And you can toggle that on or off based on if you're going to be using Skype, for instance. You can turn it back on and then back off when you're done. Under the microphone, it's a very similar type of a thing. You can turn access to that for applications on or off as well. And by default, we're going to see that those are on. So if you don't want those on, you can turn them both off. And we have some help and feedback as well. Let's go ahead and click the back button. And we'll go to devices. And this is similar to device manager, say on a Windows 10 computer. And we can see our devices. If we want, we can add an additional device, such as a Bluetooth device. So if it finds a Bluetooth device, then it can go ahead and add it here. Otherwise, you could also add a wireless device or everything else. If we click on the Bluetooth, we can see in our case, we don't really have one for it to find because this is an emulation mode. But that is where you would locate your Bluetooth devices. Same thing with printers. By default, you're going to see a Microsoft PDF printer, which is great. We can also click to add a device as well. And it's going to search the network for a printer. Now, if you're on Wi-Fi, this is actually a pretty easy thing to do. If you're on using public cellular connections, then it's going to be a lot more difficult because your printers are going to likely be in a local area network. So in emulation mode, it does not find printers, but on the final device, of course, it will. And we have our mouse. We can change the cursor speed if we want. We can also change how many lines at a time that we can scroll. So if you scroll once on your mouse, then you'll see how many lines it will go up or down, and you can change that to be higher or lower. And we also have the roll the mouse wheel to scroll, and we see one screen at a time or multiple lines at a time. So this is going to be if you have a Bluetooth mouse connected, which you're going to need to click on Bluetooth and other devices, and then you're going to be able to do that. And it may also be possible that you'll have either USB-C or some other type of device that you can plug in as well. But at this point, we don't really know what's going to be on the Duo phone. Under Touchpad, we see the touchpad is on, and here are all the options. You can change the cursor speed, so if things are not moving fast enough for you as you drag your finger along, or moving too fast because maybe you have an accessibility issue, you can make that faster or slower. We also have the option to tap with 2 fingers to right-click, tap twice and drag to multi-select, tap the lower right corner of the touchpad to right-click and reduce sensitivity while typing. So all those things are different options that you can choose. By default, we see medium sensitivity, but you can make it high or low as well. And under scroll and zoom, you have drag 2 fingers to scroll, which can be really helpful. And you have the down motion scrolls up. If you don't like that, you can do down motion scrolls down. So whatever you're more comfortable with then. And of course, pinch to zoom is turned on. A lot of people like to use that. Under pen and Windows ink, you can switch from right hand to left hand, which will be good for about 15% of you. We have the show cursor. So show cursor basically shows the cursor all the time. If you don't want to see the cursor all the time, say for instance when you're not using it, then you'll want to uncheck that. We also have the ignore touch input when I'm using my pen. So if you're using a pen instead of a mouse or your fingers, then you're going to want to ignore your touch input. For handwriting, you see the size of font when writing directly into text. So it really depends on the size of your hand. So if you have small hands, you may want to go small, medium, or large, depending on what you believe the size of your hands are compared to other people. And then we have font when using handwriting. And by default, it's going to be this particular font, but you've got a few different options. When I tap a text field with my pen, use the handwriting panel or touch keyboard to input text. You have always, when a physical keyboard isn't attached, or never. And here we have USB options. Of course, we don't know what type of USB is going to be on this device yet, but we do know there's going to be something that's going to allow us to connect some sort of devices to it. In the settings application using personalization, we'll see what it is that we can change here. Here we have the background type, and by default we see a picture, and we can click browse. Now, of course, if you have any pictures that you've saved on your phone, maybe you snapped some pictures or downloaded some pictures, you'll be able to choose those as your background. I don't, since this is emulation mode, and everything in here is completely blank. So I have no other pictures to choose. However, I can go to a slideshow as well. And again, I don't have a slideshow going on, but if I did, I'd also be able to choose that. And we can change the picture. By default, it says 1 hour, 6 hours, or 1 day. And we can also use Bing pictures of the day. And there's our Bing picture of the day. Under colors, we can choose an accent color. So we see we've got the blue color as our accent color. Maybe you want to go with a light gray. We could certainly do that. And then when we go down to our start button and click on it, we see gray is our accent color. We could change to something crazy like whatever color that is. And we can also go to a custom color and choose a color of our choosing. We can also go to where it says choose your color. We have light or dark mode. And there's our dark mode colors. So having changed our color, we'll change it to this one here. Let's open up an application and see how that affects it. So if we go into, for instance, the calculator, we see now it matches our accent color. Of course, we only see it under the equal sign and during the splash screen when it starts up, but it gives us a good idea of how that works. So every app is going to be slightly different with the way that accent color works. And we'll open the color again, and we see that the color is now changed to blue. So we don't see a lot of different options here for personalization, but we have enough so we can change a few things. If we go to accounts, it does not give us the ability to add an account. However, we can manage the account by clicking here, and it will open up our web browser off to the left. And it would be the same thing as if you were going to choose a web browser from any other computer that was a Microsoft computer and you logged into your Microsoft account. So it's going to open up and it gives you the opportunity to log in, and then you can manage your account. So it doesn't really have anything to do with the Windows 10X itself. It has more to do with management of the account in general. I can also go to email and accounts. And in a previous video, I added in an onmicrosoft.com account, but you can click on add an account here, and you can choose the type of account. We see lots of different options. We've got Outlook.com, Exchange, Google, Yahoo, etc. And we can also set up an advanced setup account as well. So for instance, we've got the Microsoft account is there by default, but you can add a work or school account as well. So if an application wants you to log in a certain way and it's not going to be with your Microsoft account, then you can add it here. Of course, in emulation mode, you just don't see that option, but that's okay. We have a sign-in options here. We've got the Windows Hello PIN, or you can use a security key. So if you're going to use a security key, you're going to need to plug something in to do that. If you use the Hello PIN, then it gives you the option to type in a PIN password. Now, once again, in emulation mode, you're not going to see that option. Then under Sync Your Settings, you can sync these settings across multiple devices if you had multiple devices. And we've also got to verify our identity before it will allow that to happen. So for instance, if I have favorite internet websites, I would be able to synchronize those with other computers where I have those favorites as well. And we have the Ease of Access Center in our Settings app. And we have lots of different options here. We have the screen effects to always show scroll bars, transparency, and animations. And you can show the notifications for a certain amount of time. So if you need more time, you can go to the higher amounts of time to see those screen effects. If we go to text size, you can adjust the text size. So you can go to larger text. You see every time I scroll a little bit, the text is getting larger, or it can go back smaller again. Here's the magnifier. I can use the magnifier by turning that on. The magnifier is magnifying a certain part of my screen. Now, unfortunately, I can't actually see what's happening here because it's in emulation mode. But I know, for instance, it's magnifying because if I right-click on there, it's saying change your background. So it's giving me that option. So if I click on Settings, there we go. I can see the magnifier, and it's spanning across both sections here. And by typing in accessibility in the search box, I now can turn the magnifier off. If I want to see it back on the right screen again, I'll just open it back up on the right screen. Under the high contrast, we have a high contrast option, make it easier to see for some people. Actually, that's a lot easier for me. I wouldn't mind using that. And then we have the narrator. So if you'd like to have the narrator tell you everything that's going on, you can do that.
Starting settings group, personalize narrator's voice, choose a voice, Microsoft, exiting narrator.
There you go. You can change the voice. By default, we see David, but we can go with one of the other ones as well. And we can change the voice speed. So we can make it a little bit slower. We'll turn it back on.
Settings group, personalize narrator's voice.
And here's the change pitch.
Pitch. Slider at 5:17.
There we go.
Exiting narrator.
So find the one that works best for you and try not to laugh too hard. We also have the option to hear hints on how to interact with buttons and other controls when you're hearing the narrator. And we can choose keyboard settings as well on touch keyboards. We have activate keys when I lift my finger. So find the one that works best for you in the narrator section. Under audio for hearing, we can make the device easier to hear by turning on mono. So if you don't like the stereo version, you can go with mono. It also makes it sound a little louder when you go into mono as well. Under captions, we have a caption style, which basically means that we can display the audio as text. So if that is something that's helpful for you, you can do that. We can click on Create New. And unfortunately, in the emulation, it doesn't really give us a lot of options here. So we'll have to demo this once the real Duo comes out. But you will have that option. And then interaction with the keyboards is our last section under ease of access for accessibility. And sticky keys, just like on a Windows computer, can be turned on. So you can press one key at a time for keyboard shortcuts, show the sticky keys indicator, play a sound, turn off sticky keys when two keys are pressed at the same time. So basically it just makes it easier for you to type and use keyboard shortcuts. So you can see I just pressed a key and it's making a sound. I'll turn that off and we can see down under filter keys, it allows us to ignore brief or repeated keystrokes. So if you have an issue with repeated keystrokes, then it will just ignore that information. We see the option to allow the shortcut key to start filter keys, beep when keys are pressed or accepted, bounce keys, slow keys, which waits before accepting keystrokes, and repeat keys, which is a delay repeated keystroke when you hold down a key. Under additional settings, we see prompt a message and sound when turning on sticky keys, and toggle keys plays a sound whenever you press the caps lock or num lock. So if I click that and press caps lock, there we go. We hear that toggle key. So lots of options for accessibility, which is now known as ease of access. And the last option in our settings area is update and security. So for Windows updates, we can check for updates here by clicking on check for updates. However, just keep in mind, if you click the check for updates, you will be put into the beta rotation, which could end up causing you to download and install Windows updates that may not be completely tested. Under advanced options, we have several options such as downloading updates over metered connection. So if you have a metered connection, then you can check that or not check that. You've got update notifications and pause updates. So if you don't want the updates, you can hit the drop down and choose what day you will take those updates. There's no option to completely turn them off here. I like to make sure that we show a notification when the device requires a restart. Otherwise, it's just going to restart on its own. However, if it happens sometimes in the middle of the night, it's going to wait for you to press the button, which could cause you a problem in the morning. So just keep that in mind. Then we see the restart of this device as soon as possible when it's required to install an update, and download updates over the metered connections. As I mentioned earlier, that's really for cell phone plans that are not unlimited. So if you're concerned about a cell phone plan that's going to charge more for using non-Wi-Fi connections or cellular connections, then you may want to decide whether or not to turn that on or off. Now we have Windows security. Here's our virus and threat protection, and it opens that up on the other side. And we see firewall and network is turned on, device security, browser control, as well as family options. So if we click on family options, for instance, we can click on view family settings, and then you can set up your family settings using the Edge or the Chromium version of Edge, just like you would on a Windows computer. You'll have to log into your Microsoft account and set up your family protection settings. Now, this used to be done directly on the device in the early versions of Windows 10, but they've since moved that into a web browser because a lot of people allow their kids to access these devices over multiple different computers. And this allows you to sync those settings. So you only have to set it once, and then it sets it on everything else. If we click on app and browser control, we can see that reputation-based protection is turned on. So if you're about to go to a known infected site, then it will block that information. So that's helpful. We can also turn on or off our firewall. We see that the firewall is turned on by default. And you can go into any one of these options here. And we can enable ICMP pings, which is basically just ability to ping this device to do some testing. By default, it's turned off because it is a little bit of a security risk. Now, we don't see the option to turn off the firewall in this particular version. It's possible it may be something that can be done in the final version, but it's definitely turned on here. Under device security, we don't see a lot of options here, and that's because it says standard hardware security is not supported. Now, your device might look a little different on the final Duo device. Under device performance, we can see that there are no issues with our storage or with our software or anything else at this time. So that's good news that there's no problems. And you've already seen the family options. So let's go back to the root of our system. We'll click on Home, and that takes us back to our settings. So you've seen pretty much all the different settings in the new Windows 10X. I realize that's a lengthy video. I'm going to break this up into smaller videos as well, just so people can find specific things, such as ease of access. If you have any questions or any comments, please just go ahead and post them below. Thank you.